Metroid is one of my favorite game franchises of all time. I've been a fan of this series for over 10 years. I've played through most installments, and I find these games to be an apex of the usual Nintendo polish. With that said, the very first Metroid is certainly one I don't typically go back to. My first exposure to this game was unlocking it after finishing Metroid Prime via an action replay, as I didn't have Fusion or a link cable. I thought it was a cool little unlockable, but otherwise I couldn't really get into the game very much. I'd seek out the internet consensus and find that I wasn't alone in that. Metroid is an amazing series, but unfortunately that first title falls into the pile of NES games that haven't aged all that gracefully. Most modern reviews of this game are inclined to rip into it for its admittedly outdated design. New players are more likely to find frustration with this title rather than fun. I made my peace with that as I was getting into the franchise and decided I wasn't going to bother playing the game legit, as I was unlikely to have any fun doing so. Despite that, I wanted to familiarize myself with this game anyway, as I was still interested in this series' humble beginnings. I would add the original Metroid to my 3DS Virtual Console library. Luckily for me, as someone who wasn't interested in playing this game legit, the password system is a doorway for all sorts of experimentation. There's hundreds to try, but the only one I was interested in is the NAR password, which grants you invincibility, infinite missiles, and all the upgrades in the game right at the start. Not having to worry about this game's old school design and difficulty certainly made it more approachable, despite the fact that I was cheating. But I didn't care. I wasn't going to have fun the real way, so I can at least be a cheating bastard, which is fun in its own right. There was still the matter of the game's confusing map design, so I would study a sprite tile map of the whole game to find the locations of Kraid and Ridley, so that I could defeat them and access Torian and finish the game. After a while, I would fully memorize the optimal route and would be able to plow through the game in about 30 minutes. This would become a routine during my middle school days. Before classes or during downtime, I'd boot up Metroid, activate the NAR password, and play through the game that way. It made for a pretty decent way to waste time, and sure, I was still cheating, but it was fun enough for me to do a good number of times before I felt I was done. I never really felt bad doing it that way, as I had Zero Mission to provide me a more polished take on the original Metroid experience. Zero Mission is probably my favorite 2D Metroid game, and I would come to play the absolute shit out of it as the years went by without even thinking about touching the original again. I would continue to see the overall reputation of the original continue to spiral downwards as more and more gamers would vocalize how much they don't like the original Metroid. For the most part, I agreed. All the issues people have with the original always came off as very fair and valid. The controls, the map design, the grinding, and overall challenge just isn't as tight as future entries, or even other contemporary NES titles. Again, the fact that I immediately resorted to cheating should tell you enough at just how unapproachable this game has become in modern times. But then something kind of weird happened. One day, about 2 years ago, I decided to play Metroid. No, not Zero Mission. No, not cheating my way through an emulator. Metroid. The original Metroid on original cartridge on original console. I would give myself a little outside assistance in the form of a simply designed map with item locations marked on my phone as I played. You can say that that's not being fair, but is it really any less fair than using Nintendo Power Magazine with maps, item locations, and crap loads of hints and tricks? Frankly, I find the use of guides and walkthroughs to be completely fair and recommendable if it makes playing a game more fun and comfortable. This also even applies to cheats, but that's a topic for another day. Either way, it was me, a simple map, and the game. While playing, I noticed something kinda weird. I was making my way through the game, collecting items, blasting aliens, and it kinda hit me. I was having fun. Like, a lot more than I thought I would. All the issues most gamers have with this game now were always in the back of my head, but miraculously, I never ran into them. The grinding is the #1 biggest issue people have from what I've gathered, but since I only died once near the beginning of the game, I never had to do that. Even on my recent playthrough to record footage for this video, I didn't die once. What helped was my previous knowledge of the game's map, mostly from my playthroughs of Zero Mission, so I knew where the screw attack was and made it one of the first items I grabbed, which would then make the rest of the game more comfortable. I spent my playthrough using the map to plan a route and nab whatever items I came across. It was going through these motions that I was able to really appreciate the game's other qualities. I noticed the controls really weren't as bad as many would think. Yeah, compared to future games, it's quite limiting, but as far as what this game is asking of you, the controls are perfectly doable. Sure, it's a little annoying when you can't shoot enemies on the ground or aim diagonally, but again, since I got the screw attack pretty early, it never became that much of an issue for me. Even before getting the screw attack, I found it advantageous to take things slower and simply practice evasion rather than confrontation. Memorizing enemy patterns to avoid chip damage made death less likely as I navigated my way through the depths of Zebes. Overall, there's a vibe with this original title that was never really captured again in later entries. The pure black backgrounds are a common critique amongst modern gamers as a jab at this game's visuals. But I don't know, I kinda like it. Especially when playing on a CRT, those extra dark visuals really sold the feeling of exploring deep cavernous environments. Gave me the impression that these areas are so dark that only the foreground is realistically visible. The music further complemented that, and while I do prefer updated arrangements in future games, these older NES tracks fit the original experience perfectly. There was a nice groove of making my way through the map while following a map, grabbing new upgrades, and making my way to the bosses. One other thing about having a map is that it completely removes the guesswork of finding where to go next. The game is subject to have cryptic navigation with destructible pathways that would otherwise not be discoverable before without egregious trial and error. I followed the fan route of killing Ridley first, as with the screw attack his Lair isn't too dangerous, and he's by far the easiest boss. Not to mention it would cut back on the Norfair backtracking, which is great as Norfair is by far the worst area in the game. Not that it's hard, but it's home to so many items, which is nice, but navigation got pretty dull, not gonna lie. Truthfully, there wasn't actually anything too exciting about the playthrough. Some may say that using a guide just amounts to following a list to check off objectives, which may be true to an extent, but it's not like I can't still use the opportunity to get more accustomed to the game's overall design. I'm not much of a completionist, so near the end game I felt no need to grab the last missiles I needed, as I doubt they'd be that useful. And since you can only hold 6 energy tanks, there's no point to nab the last 2, unless you've died and need a quick energy restock, which they can act as. It actually didn't take that long to get a feel for this game's wonky controls. The physics are floaty, which may not be to everyone's taste. My advice would be to understand the difference between spin jumping, how not spin jumping gives you more directional mid-air control, which can help with tricky navigation. Before I knew it, I made it to Torian, which did make me nervous since at this point there was no more cheesing the game, as this place is a straight path to the end. But once again, thanks to my previous experience, I was able to get by without much issue. I did have to be extra careful with those damn Rinkas, as they can shave your health pretty quickly. But I was comfortable enough with the controls to simply freeze them and proceed to unload into Mother Brain. One escape sequence later, and I finished the game. Even got one of the better endings. Then it dawned on me that, shit, I just beat Metroid legit. Felt pretty good, not gonna lie. No emulators, no save states, just me, the game, and a simple map. Took only a couple of hours, and overall, I was stunned at how much I enjoyed my time with it. I recognize that a good portion of that was probably luck, and me simply having previous experience with cheats. Playing the game legit then kinda became a challenge run, and like any challenge run, finishing it that way hits a little better. I still recognize that most will probably struggle with this game, and luckily I think there's a great option for you should you be interested. Lately, Infidelity has been porting over various NES games to Super Nintendo, kinda like all the different decomps and fan ports of retro games to PC. At first I kinda questioned the real utility of porting over these games to Super Nintendo when the end result would seem virtually identical, but looking at them further really showed the real world advantages that they bring. There's basic stuff like bypassing any sprite limitations and slowdowns that the NES version suffered from, which actually makes the game a little harder since you can't abuse the slowdown to avoid enemies. But there's also lots of really cool shit too. Upon loading the ROM, you get a cool new selection screen letting you choose various soundtrack options. You may have seen MSU1 patches for various Super Nintendo games to allow for CD quality music. With Metroid on Super Nintendo, Infidelity has included MSU1 support for various soundtracks like orchestral arrangements, the Zero Mission OST, and the Famicom OST. Let me tell you, it's so bizarre listening to such high quality musical arrangements coming from real hardware via a flash card. It's a matter of taste, and personally I don't think the orchestral or Zero Mission soundtracks really fit the game, but having options is awesome. He also re-implemented the saving from the Famicom Disk System version, which is pretty great if you can't finish the game in one sitting without having to rely on save states. Quick aside, but my SD to SNES freaking crashed on me. Whenever I decide to use it, it's 50-50 on whether it'll work just fine or not. I did a full playthrough not too long ago with no issues, but now it's not fucking working. I couldn't find much reliable info on what the issue could be or how to resolve it. For the remainder of the footage, I just played on an emulator with CRT filters with unfortunately bad HDR conversion because AMD's Adrenaline recording software sucks. Anyway, once you're in the game, yeah, overall it seems pretty one-to-one, but just you wait. Firstly, holding the R button now activates missiles. Not gonna lie, this small tweak may be my favorite change. I never used missiles outside of bosses originally because I find having to take my thumb off to push the select button to be cumbersome. I find holding a shoulder button to select missiles to work a lot better, so having it here now is awesome. Holding the L button also locks your aiming direction. This is actually pretty cool. It can make various encounters a little more engaging. The Mad Lad even went to include the unused, unmirrored sprites from the original development, so that's cool. The real treat is when you press X. Oh shit, we got a map and status screen just like future Metroids. This is also where you can quickly save your game. Doing so saves the amount of health and missiles you have. The map also lists all item locations and where you've explored, so just like that, you can play this version as well as I did without the need of any further outside assistance. The ability to toggle upgrades like Super Metroid is here too, which is pretty cool. As you progress and nab the Ice Beam and Wave Beam, you'll notice that, shit, they stack. This is awesome and allows you to enjoy the best of both weapons without having to pick between the two. Nice. These new quality of life additions makes this game feel so much more approachable while still maintaining that OG experience. You can take it a step further as several patches are included with the ROM to further enhance the experience. The game normally only allows for a maximum of 6 energy tanks, but thanks to the memory increase of being on Super Nintendo, you can patch to be able to hold all 8 energy tanks in the game. You can patch to start with 99 energy instead of 30 after dying, which seems more reasonable. You can patch for improved bomb drops, making infinite bomb jumps possible. You can improve the game's frankly terrible RNG item drops, which would make grinding so much quicker to how it was before. In the original, Samus's spin jump was always slower than her max running speed, which caused a scrolling jitter which could get visually distracting. But now you can patch to have the speeds match, making for more fluid gameplay. Finally, you can enable a new spring ball jump, which is pretty cool and allows for new sequence break techniques, which is fun to experiment with. I say if you're going to play this version, then I'd recommend enabling all these patches as they greatly smooth out the experience and simply make the game more fun to play. Going forward, this will be how I play the original Metroid. I had a surprising amount of fun when playing the OG legit, but this version is simply a more polished form of that same experience. I've seen all sorts of patches for the original NES Metroid, which may include a map feature or updated sprites. While cool, I feel these hacks sort of take away the appeal and identity of this original game. If I want to play a Metroid game with Super Metroid sprites, I'll play Super Metroid, you know? For me, the appeal with OG Metroid is that dark, dank vibe you get when playing the game at night, having a CRT shine what little luminance you have, listening to the quiet, creepy soundtrack with all those sci-fi NES sound effects. All told, it makes this Super Nintendo port the de facto version of the original Metroid to me. Zero Mission is still a much better game that's worth playing more, but as far as experiencing the very first title, I'd go with Infidelity's version. Finally, after experiencing the original on original cartridge and playing through this updated release, I think I can say now that, yeah, I love Metroid. What started as simply piquing my curiosity led to appreciating this game for what it is, as the start of one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I probably won't go back to this game for a while, but I'm comfortable siding with this game in a more positive light opposed to the animosity most seem to have with it now. There's another NES game that I've also found some new appreciation for, which may be the subject for the next video. As usual, I would like to thank those who've watched this far into the video. I apologize now that I'm currently ankle deep in a long-ass game at the moment that's taking up quite a bit of my time, as well as moving into a new spot, so the next few uploads may be a little bit, but I'll try to have new videos out as quickly as I can. With all that said, that should do it for me today, so I just want to say thank you for watching.